let's talk about evaluation and retention. Evaluation is about more than just finding out how we did or how we're doing. Evaluation can be a planning tool. Evaluation questions about this event should inform how volunteers are utilized, scheduled, and organized for the next event. Evaluation questions about appreciation should inform budgeting and planning for volunteer recognition and appreciation the next year. Evaluation can also be a learning tool. What questions do we want and need answers to? An evaluation isn't about criticism, though it can be constructive. When we think about evaluation of our volunteers and our volunteer program, we want to make sure that we're creating opportunities for volunteers to provide feedback about their roles and the ways that they would like to be involved. We want to make sure we're creating opportunities for volunteers to assess their own skills and interests on at least a regular basis, because skills and interests change. We also want to make sure that volunteers have an opportunity to suggest ideas for improvement and increased efficiencies in operations and programs in which they're involved. Volunteers have a really unique perspective on our work. And if we don't create space for them to share that perspective and those ideas that they may be the only ones who have the perspective to see, we could be really missing out on some valuable input into our programs. And finally, we want to make sure that our partners have an opportunity to provide the same kind of feedback, ideas, and self-assessment with respect to their involvement with the volunteer program. So business owners who interact with volunteers, other community members, staff members, should also be able to provide feedback on the volunteer program. Volunteer surveys can be really valuable in a lot of different ways. You want to conduct evaluation interviews, maybe on an annual basis or mid-year check-ins with your volunteers, with your ongoing volunteers, to see how things are going. You want to collect both qualitative and quantitative data, ideas and feedback for improving the volunteer program or the event that the volunteer is helping out with. You might ask things about recruitment suggestions, as specific as asking volunteers for actual names and contact information of people that they know who might be a good fit to volunteer with your program. Doing an online survey after an event, having a written evaluation form at the event, simple follow-up emails with a few questions for volunteers to answer, doing a phone call survey that either you or other volunteers can help you with. All of these are different ways to collect information about your volunteers and your volunteer program. You want to make sure that you are both measuring and reporting the impact that volunteers are having on your community. So not only are you collecting information about the impact, but you're also sharing that back with volunteers so that they know the impact they're having in the community. When we think about retention, some of the questions that we want to answer are our volunteers sticking around? Are they happy? And if they are, great, why? And if they aren't, why aren't they happy? Are you following up with volunteers who leave, who choose not to continue volunteering with you, to find out why they've chosen not to? The truth is that the professionalism of each aspect of your program that we've discussed throughout this toolkit, all of those elements impact retention. In terms of measuring retention, there's really no best practice metric for retention. Every organization, every Main Street has to define for itself what retention looks like. A great resource in a book called Volunteer Engagement 2.0 talks about retention as the percent of volunteers who have fulfilled the commitment that they have made. So of course that's going to be different, not just for every program, but for every volunteer. But that's a great way to think about retention. It's not just how many volunteers you have from one year to the next. It's not the number of volunteer hours. but what commitments are volunteers making to your program, and are they fulfilling those volunteers? So if you think about, if you have 10 people come to an orientation and 6 end up applying and becoming volunteers, that may be a great retention rate. That means that those other 4 opted out because they knew it wasn't a good fit for them before you both invested in each other in them becoming a volunteer with your organization. Ultimately, you need to come up with your own definition of what retention is and then work toward maximizing that for your Main Street. In this section of the toolkit, you have a sample volunteer experience evaluation form, also a sample volunteer check-in guideline form. Both of these are designed in Microsoft Word as fillable forms, but the editing is not restricted. So you can use it simply as a document and update it as needed, and you can restrict the editing if you want to use it as a fillable form. And you also have a sample spreadsheet of just a list of volunteer program evaluation questions that you might consider asking on some sort of online survey or written survey or phone survey to assess your volunteer program as a whole.